Western backers. Today, we once again heard lies about how Russian troops attacked the nuclear power plant. And this is just a small part of the unprecedented campaign of lies and misinformation against Russia.
Meanwhile, Ukraine renewed calls for a no-fly zone, something that NATO refused once again on Friday, saying that it would lead to an even more brutal war.
It is already the common duty of the international community to stop Russian murderers and terrorists. Stop by closing the skies over Ukraine. Stop by supporting Ukraine in terms of security and humanitarian assistance. Stop by expelling Russians from international institutions, as they do not deserve to be among civilized and responsible nations.
There was no vote on any resolution that would condemn Russia's actions. Russia is a member of the UN Security Council, and as such, it would have vetoed the move. Last week, a resolution condemning Moscow's aggression against Ukraine was scuppered after Russia voted against it.
Rallies continue to be held in support of Ukraine around the world. The war is Europe's most intense in a generation, possibly its biggest since the Second World War. Images coming in from Zurich, Switzerland, and from London, England. But rallies also being held elsewhere. In addition to the lives lost, the violence has already shattered existing assumptions about European security and could be a blow to the global economy. Rallies also to be held here in the French capital, Paris. Yenoli standing by in downtown Paris. We can speak to her now at Place de la République. Yena, are you with us? Yena, are you with us? We just want to know what the atmosphere is like at Place de la République.
Merci.
Yena, can you hear us? What's the atmosphere like at where you are?
Well, in Place de la République in northeastern Paris, the central square is almost full now of people who have come out to show their solidarity to the Ukrainian people. We see people wearing blue and yellow, the colors, of course, of the Ukrainian flag. People have brought their own flags from home. They're carrying posters with the messages, "Stand with Ukraine" and "Help Ukrainians." Of course, even before the conflict, there were 17,000 Ukrainians living here in France. And since the conflict, according to the Interior Ministry, there's been more than 800 people who have made it here as refugees. And we've also been talking to quite a lot of people since we've arrived. A lot of people expressing their fear about what's happening in their country.
So, tell us a little bit more. I mean, it does look like it's a very crowded demonstration behind you. What have these people been saying?
Well, we spoke to a young Ukrainian woman, notably, who expressed her absolute fear about what's happening in her home country. She said that her father was still in Kharkiv, the city that has been shelled by Russian forces. She fears for his life, and also he has now enrolled in the army to fight for Ukraine. We also spoke to some French people who have no particular link with the Ukraine, but who wanted to come anyway to show their solidarity against what they see as the Russian aggression against an independent country happening here on European soil.
All right, Yena, thank you very much. Yenoli reporting from downtown Paris. Meanwhile, in Russia, Vladimir Putin has tightened control over information about the war in Ukraine. Some social media have been restricted, and foreign media, France 24 included, have had to either stop broadcasting or reporting from the country. That after a new law was enacted that said anyone spreading, quote, false information about the war could be sent to prison for 15 years. Of course, the Kremlin dictating what is true and what is false. Earlier, we spoke to Matthew Wyman, a senior lecturer in Russian politics at Kiel University.
In Russia, it seems that the Kremlin doesn't feel that it can stop all information from circulating, and so for example, Telegram, the social messenger, is very popular in Russia and still being widely used. I also understand from Russian colleagues that Russians who have a VPN are able to use that to access information fairly readily. So I think it will be a challenge for the Kremlin to entirely close down the flow of information, however hard they're trying.
Vladimir Putin in power for 2 decades now. We've seen him clamp down on dissent various times, also on independent Russian media. But to this scale, have you seen the Russian president take such action before?
Well, no. Clearly, this is the furthest that he's gone. There's no longer any pretense to anything other than that Russia is a police state. The people are not just arrested for going out to protest. There've even been reports of people knocking on the doors of. Knocking on people's doors and saying, "We hear you're an opponent of the government," and you'll have seen those heartbreaking pictures of children who were arrested because they had no to war placards and sat in prison cells. So no, this is there's I suppose earlier in the Putin period there was this pretense that Russia was a functioning democracy. We carried on holding well, they still do carry on holding elections, even though we know that the results are completely unbelievable and falsified. But I think clearly. In the recent period, Putin has passed some kind of a point of no return in respect of the way that he treats his own population, and it's certainly going to be a key, I suppose, in the next few weeks to see how, as the effect of the clampdown and as the effect of the growing economic crisis deepens. How the Russian people will react to that.
Meanwhile, more and more international companies have decided to pull the plug on their operations in retaliation for Moscow's incursion. The South Korean tech giant Samsung has stopped shipments to Russia. Also, in the latest development, IT company Microsoft suspending sales of its products and services. While here in France, the luxury fashion brand Chanel has announced that it's halting all business in Russia.
The price of a barrel of oil has been creeping up, but since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, it has soared. A 47% increase in just 3 months, with consumers at the pump here in France now feeling the full effect.
Sur un plein, ouais, je dirais que ça fait bien entre 5-10 euros en plus, quoi.
Ça fait un choc. Alors du coup, j'ai pris que 50 euros. Je vais être obligé de me débrouiller, on va s'ajuster, quoi.
Some fuel distributors say their purchase price has already increased by 10 cents in recent days, while customers could be set to face an even more brutal increase next week. Concern has also spread to other sectors of the economy, like agriculture, which has been directly impacted by the rise in price of raw materials. Russia is a major exporter of grains such as wheat, but also of fertilizers to Europe.
Right now, feed is 330 euros a tonne, which is already huge. This time last year, it was at 240 euros a tonne. Now they're even talking about 400 euros or possibly more. So it's unbelievable. We're already in the red. I don't know where we're going.
Other industries facing notable challenges include automotives, cosmetics and aeronautics. Following Russia's ban on flights from 36 countries, including all EU nations, planes bound for Asia must now take new routes to bypass the country. That means at least 2 additional hours of travel and a huge additional cost for carriers.
There is an increase in aircraft operating costs because we are consuming more fuel, because we are going to pay more airport taxes, landing taxes, overflight taxes. The cost to maintain these routes to Asia could rise by perhaps 30 to 40%, but the airlines are not going to be able to offset that cost increase using ticket prices, simply because there is competition.
Sanctions imposed on Moscow are set to considerably affect the Russian economy, but evidently not without consequences for France and Europe as a whole.
Earlier, a Russian missile strike hit Ukraine's Holocaust Memorial and highlighted the significant historical and cultural sites that are at risk as Russia continues its assault. Ukraine is home to some 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and Alison Sargent has been looking at how museums have been working hard to protect their collections.
If only it was an art installation. In the western city of Lviv, employees of the Museum of Ethnography and Arts and Crafts put metal panels across the windows, an effort to protect their collection, which includes clocks, jewelry, rugs, and cultural artifacts from across Europe.
Of course, we will not be safe from a missile, but hopefully safe from shockwaves. We want to protect at least a part of the items because we have an enormous collection of artifacts that are admired by European colleagues and visitors.
Some museums have managed to stow away their works and reconvert for the war effort, like Lviv's National Art Museum, where emergency supplies are now being stored and distributed. Lviv's historic city center is one of 7 World Heritage Sites across Ukraine. Among those at risk in the capital, Kiev, are the nation's most sacred Orthodox shrines, the St. Sophia Cathedral and the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra. The director of Ukraine's National History Museum expressed his concerns in a letter to Swedish colleagues.
There is no guarantee that the Ukrainian cultural heritage will not be plundered and transferred to Russian museums, especially given that Kiev has a special place in Putin's interpretation of Russian history and its roots.
At least some artwork has already been lost. Ukraine's foreign ministry said that Russian forces burned down a museum in Ivankiv, destroying 25 works by the late folk artist Maria Primachenko.
And the war looming large over next month's presidential election in France. Already Emmanuel Macron had to cancel a glitzy first rally in Marseille. The incumbent, though, releasing his first campaign video, a new one coming out each Friday, shot as a sort of mini-series. Now, Macron waited until the last possible day to declare he'll seek a second 5-year term, and polls show he is a frontrunner. His biggest challenge expected to come from the far-right's Marine Le Pen. But with war returning to Europe, there are questions over the logistical challenges of holding an election. Some commentators may say it's undemocratic without sufficient time to campaign, to rally, to debate, and so on. Earlier, we put the question to Paul Smith, head of the French department at the University of Nottingham. Here's what he had to say.
I think there are 2 questions there. The major war is, of course, a matter of enormous concern for all of us. But, you know, the timetable is fixed. It's there. I see no appetite amongst the candidates to push it back, to postpone the election. It would be very difficult to do that. It would certainly require Parliament, an act of Parliament. It would require the Constitutional Council approving it. But also, if you give in a sense, you know, this is being disrupted. Here we have an authoritarian dictator disrupting a democratic process. You know, the calendar is there and it's fixed. Now, I know that people have talked about, well, Macron won't participate in a debate of all the candidates. Well, nobody did until 2017. That wasn't the way that things were done. That's not a well-established tradition. There is time, there is space. The challenge that Macron faces is actually being able to get out and do what the other candidates are doing, which is hold their public meetings, because this is where the problem for the president candidate will arise in this situation. But I think that the appetite at the moment is not. It doesn't seem to me amongst the candidates or from the president to be going towards the idea of pushing this process back.
And one final question, Professor. Emmanuel Macron has really tried to take a sort of central role in bringing France to the sort of international stage and mediate this war in Ukraine. But what grade would you give him on that task?
Well, he's kind of playing the good cop to Biden's nasty cop in the sense, but he's also got this role. Let's not forget France is chairing the European Union. So, you know, there's this secondary role that he has to take. But, you know, there has to be a bit of something, a bit of each, doesn't there? And somebody has to be trying to keep keep Putin talking. And if Macron's willing to take the risk of being that person, then I think that is being seen by the French public, as we're seeing in the polls. That is gaining him some kind of greater credibility with his fellow countrymen and women.
All right, time now for a quick break, and then our continuing coverage of the war in Ukraine continues.
Your needs are changing, and so is France24.com. With articles,